Let's cut the open cup.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Open Cup. I'm Corey, and I'm joined here today by nobody. Yeah, it's not going to be a very exciting episode, but it is a very special episode. It's been kind of a zany week here at the depot, so we weren't going to have time for our regularly scheduled podcast episode. So I thought that I would, at the request of several lovely listeners, kind of just do a brief explanation about what coffee cupping is and why we do it as coffee professionals. So, for me, a coffee roaster, what I mostly am looking to do, I have two primary reasons for coffee cupping coffee. Yeah, I want to produce a consistent and quality product. So as a crop ages, or maybe we get in a new bean from a different crop, but it's the same growing region. I want to be able to make sure that when we're selling that product to a customer, it tastes as close to the usual as possible. And the other reason is palate development. The more you practice, the more you cup coffee and taste coffees, the more flavors you're going to get out of the coffee, just by by doing it over and over again. So you get better at it. For example, here, we recently received what I believe is a new crop of Costa Rican. And I noticed right away when I was roasting it that it was behaving differently in the roaster. It was harder to get it to our usual end temperature without, pushing tons and tons of heat into it, which, it was just hard to get it to follow the usual roast curve that I'm used to. So I've had to make adjustments to the way that I roast it. But I need to make sure that those adjustments that I'm making during the roast are beneficial to the quality of the cup after all is said and done. So, in order to do that, I need to cup the coffee consistently. I need to know what our coffees taste like. I need to, make sure I'm constantly drinking our coffees so that the people who are also constantly drinking them don't complain. So that's why we do it. Also, it's just coffee's delicious and I love to do it. But the how is what we're looking to analyze is dry fragrance, the smell of the coffee when it's, just ground, the aroma or the wet smell. Once the water hits it, it's going to change and develop throughout that process. And then there's the break where we're going to agitate the grinds and release the gases that have been kind of trapped by the crust at the top. And then we're analyzing the flavor, the body, and the acidity. So the start to finish is we have a cup of ground coffee in front of us, and we smell as much as we can out of the dry fragrance. We're constantly sniffing like dogs, just so that we're not overloading our soft palate. So we're doing that good stuff. And then once we're ready to add the water, Craig specifically, pours it in his magnificent vortex, and that is, it's brewing coffee. Pretty crude. It's kind of cowboy coffee style. So we let that steep or brew or sit for 4 minutes, and throughout that 4 minutes, we're smelling it and taking note of any changes or things that we see that are the same. As you add the water and heat, oftentimes, you sort of like activate that coffee and you get new and exciting smells out of it. And then the break, we take our cupping spoon, which is basically, it's like a soup spoon. We get our noses right next to the coffee and we just push the grinds into the water 3 or 4 times just to sort of, agitate those grinds. And right at that moment, the grinds always kind of form a crust at the top. They seal in a lot of gases and oils and smells. So that first moment in the break, you'll get unique smells that you won't get again throughout the rest of the cupping. So it's kind of the most exciting part, for me at least, because it's usually, just cool and unique. So you break at that point, push the crust around, skim out the top. I use my 2 spoons. put the spoons together and just kind of try to get as much of the loose floating grinds out of the coffee cup as possible so that you're not chewing on your drink. And then it begins the taste. And you want to kind of taste the coffee over the course of, 10 to 15 minutes, just because as the coffee cools, you'll continue to see different flavors come through. And the reason we slurp and not just sip it casually and talk about what it tastes like is you want to aspirate the coffee over the entirety of your tongue so that you're getting all of your taste buds covered in the coffee so that you can really assess, all of the flavors. And then you're just taking note of, what's the acidity like on, whatever metric or scale you like to use. I usually do it pretty crude, just kind of either heavy body, light body, how acidic is it, high, medium, low. You're kind of, you can compare it to like something from milk to lemon juice or whatever, like for your low to high, whatever. I mean, you can get super intensely into it. Largely what we're doing is just trying to get a good quality and consistent product out to the people who love to drink our coffee. And yeah, that's coffee cupping 101. So for those of you who have been asking, you're welcome. I'm glad I could help. Wasn't a very long episode, wasn't a very funny episode, but it is an episode. So thank you for listening. Thank you to Pavel and to Dan for suggesting that we describe what coffee cupping is. I hope this helps. I don't know if there's a way for me to pin podcast episodes, but that would probably be useful. I'll just actually title it something useful this time instead of, I don't know, my dump truck brings all the gravel to the yard or some obscure reference that I'm often like to name my silly episodes. I'm rambling. I don't know how to end an episode by myself, so I guess that's that. I'll put a lid on it. Bye.